Trump knows that the numbers he's putting out there aren't true. Why? Because he changes the numbers all the time. He changes his numbers based upon who's whispering in your ear. But he can't be ignorant enough not to actually have someone come in and say, no, the real numbers are this, Mr. President. But the real numbers don't support the policies he's trying to see. The real numbers show that Russia is not only winning, but winning decisively, that her economy is sanction proof, that we can't touch their economy. And the last thing is, this is a man who claims, he says, I met with Vladimir Putin 5 times directly, and we had, 12 phone calls. Those numbers are rough. He claims to know Putin, but not very well. See, the one number he's missing is 27 million. And the reason why I bring that up is that's the number of dead that the Soviet Union lost in World War II to fight and win a war of existential survival. The Russians view this Ukrainian conflict as a war of existential survival. They're going to pay whatever it takes to win this war. They're not backing down. They're not going to surrender. They're not going to have a ceasefire. They're going to win. And if Trump doesn't want to help end the war sooner, this war will go on. And then there's additional numbers. See, McNamara's lies cost America about another 4,000 or 5,000 dead. Trump's lies are going to cost Ukraine another 100,000 dead, maybe more. The blood that he says he doesn't want to be spilled will be on his hands because of his inability to grasp reality. He really needs someone to sit down and give him the hard talk. I'm hoping that if Tulsi Gabbard is finally, brought in as the director of national intelligence, that she will do that she will send Keith Kellogg out of the room and she will sit down and say, Mr. President, these are the hard numbers. These are the real numbers. This is what really is going to happen. Here's our economic expert on Russia. They're going to tell you what the economy is like, why it's resilient, why you can't bust it. That's her job as the director of national intelligence. This is a man who has put out a political outcome that he wants, an end to the war. But it's also one that he can't accept reality, meaning he can't allow the war to end on Russia's terms, because that, of course, doesn't exude the kind of strength that he's trying to exude. So he needs to dictate the outcome, the solution. And to justify it, he has to buy into data that sustains and supports the pathways he's chosen. The Russians are winning. Everybody acknowledges that, but he has to make it appear that with a little bit of pressure from the United States, the Russians could be losing. I mean, his big thing right now is, ruining the Russian economy, dropping oil to $45 a barrel. I would just ask him what that does to West Permian oil in West Texas. It destroys the U.S. oil economy. We'll have a 30% drop in oil production. Now, we could go to Canada. No, we can't, because we just irritated the Canadians. So we can't get oil from them or the Mexicans or the Venezuelans. So our economy is trashed because he's trying to play tough guy with a Russian oil-based economy that produces oil at $12 a barrel. So even if you drop it to 45, they still, are making money. They're not making enough money to balance their budget. But hey, Russia could go into 2 years of deficit spending. We, on the other hand, will collapse our oil economy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. This war will end when Russia wants it to end. Russia's prepared. They passed budgets and they're gearing up defense industry to have this war go on for another 2 or 3 years. And then after which time they would reassess and reconfigure. But economically, they are positioned for this war to go on 2 or 3 years. Their military has built a plan to sustain manpower and equipment. Russia's not running out of men. Russia's not running out of equipment. And Russia's economy is geared to sustain it. And most importantly, they have political leadership that is dedicated to this task. So this war can go on for another 2-3 years. Ukraine can't last another 2-3 years. The Ukrainian head of intelligence says they die this summer. That's not Scott Ritter. That's Budanov saying it's over. We're finished this summer because we run out of everything. I think the Ukrainians are still using ATACMS in the lower limit. The Russians made it clear that they didn't want ATACMS going beyond a certain range, but that ATACMS missiles fired below that certain range wouldn't get the retaliation. My understanding is that the Ukrainians have launched a few attacks using ATACMS missiles at the lower range, but they haven't violated the red line that was set by Russia, which even the Biden administration respected at the end. See, there's the difference between Ukraine and Gaza, because the conflict in Ukraine has an advocate that can stand up to Donald Trump, named Vladimir Putin. Where's the advocate for the Palestinians who's standing up and speaking out for them? So far, I've heard silence. But the other thing too is even with changed leadership, the Trump administration has such artificial expectations that aren't going to be met. Russia's not going to meet any of the terms that are being set forth by Keith Kellogg. They can go meet in Saudi Arabia and in Abu Dhabi all they want. They can sit there and have great Arabian coffee and nice gold plated toilets and whatever they want over there. But at the end of the day, the Russians aren't going to go, yeah, you're right. We're just going to allow European troops in there. There's going to be a frozen line. We're going to allow the banderas to continue to exist. Russia's not going to allow any of that. And until the West wakes up that the war only ends when Russia wants it to end. Because the other thing that isn't going to happen is there's not going to be a ceasefire so that the negotiations take place, in a frozen conflict, which is what the Americans want. But what about the precious minerals under the soil of Ukraine? Oh, you don't get those either. You don't get anything. You get nothing. You get bad investments. You get a loss. That's it. There's nothing good going to come out of this except that the nightmare ends. And then you can focus on fixing NATO, fixing Europe, whatever you think you can fix. But Ukraine's our business. We fix Ukraine. You've got no say in this whatsoever. The Russians say, we'll talk to you, but we're going to keep advancing. It'll be one of those negotiations, where the Russians have all the advantage because every day we go, we'll get back to you tomorrow. If I were the Russians, I'd come in and show the map. Hey, just so you guys know, today we took this village, we've surrounded this city, and we're advancing here. Okay, let's keep talking. Now, you guys still want to pretend that you're in charge? No, we'll talk again tomorrow. We went further this way. I think we killed an additional 5,000 Ukrainians today. Okay, we're ready for the next day of negotiations. Because that's how it'll be until the West goes, well, how do we make it stop? Give us what we want. Sign the document we gave you. Total surrender on the part of Ukraine. Total capitulation by the West. You get nothing. I think the United States understands that there can be no peace agreement with Russia with Zelensky as the president. Russia has said that they will never enter an agreement that's signed by Zelensky. And that's an absolute. First of all, Russia can't. I keep reminding people that Russia is a nation of laws. Whether you agree with the laws or not, it doesn't matter. The law is the law. There are ways that things have to be done, and contracts, everything have to be respected. From the Russian perspective, Zelensky is not the legitimate leader of Ukraine. The Russians have said constitution. The Russians are 100% correct on this. The legitimate leader of Ukraine is the head of the Rada, Speaker of the Rada, the parliament. And so we'll deal with that person. That person can sign an agreement, not Zelensky. So I think right now we're talking about elections so that Zelensky can be defeated and a sense of legitimacy can be imparted to whoever follows Zelensky, so that we can get to this agreement. I don't think Zelensky's going to play that game, and increasingly, I think we're going to be looking at alternatives to the removal of Zelensky that may include violence, may include exile, but it won't have him remaining as the president of Ukraine. He is the problem right now. Everybody recognizes that. But now, we've called Zelensky, we in the West have created this new Churchillian type character who, is the, God apparently. And how do you flush God down the toilet? It's tough. And that's where Zelensky belongs, is to be flushed down the toilet of life, of history. Vladimir Putin will never sit down at the table with Volodymyr Zelensky. Okay, Putin has said that. His government has said that. Putin said, I can pick some people who could sit down at a table that included Zelensky. He's not excluding the fact that Zelensky could sit at a table with some Russians picked by Vladimir Putin. But understand how the Russians work. Zelensky's not legitimate at all. So do you think Sergei Lavrov is going to sit down at a table with Zelensky? No, not anywhere close. These will be such low-level people. And the other thing we need to be clear, Russia will not negotiate. I don't, you see, we have this concept of negotiation being sort of give and take, and, Russia will dictate. And based upon the terms dictated by Russia, there can be a negotiation on, how to bring about the terms dictated by Russia. but there's not going to be a ceasefire. I mean, one of the conditions of the West is in order for it to be a negotiation, there has to be a ceasefire. You do understand that Russia will never enter into a ceasefire because to do so, Russia loses the war. Russia has spent all this time building up the advantages it currently enjoys, and it has the enemy throttled. It has its foot on their neck. The enemy is exhausted. Russia has all the power necessary to finish the job. Why would Russia take its foot off the neck, step back, let the enemy come up, dust itself off, lift some weights, get some nutrition, and be ready to fight again? So no, there's some misperceptions out here, and I think Keith Kellogg and Donald Trump are going to be educated on this, and hopefully they are being educated on this right now by the Russians. I believe that if Donald Trump was smart, he'd be focused more on what a post-Ukraine conflict larger framework settlement could be. That's where the United States has the potential to negotiate. Why do I believe that? Because Russia has said so. If you remember, December 17th, Russia submitted draft treaties of a new European security framework to the United States and NATO. And Russia said, here's the treaty we'd like. We'd like you to read it and then sit down and let's have a discussion about it. So Russia's ready to negotiate that. Russia will not yield 1 inch on any of its fundamental demands on Ukraine. This is an existential issue of survival. Yeah. The Russians will not surrender an inch. That's just the reality of this is an existential struggle. I don't think Donald Trump realizes that. I mean, when he sits there and he uses exaggerated casualty figures, he's just fallen into what I call the Westmoreland trap. Trump has fallen into the same trap, using fake numbers to set up conditions for a victory, fake references to a failed Russian economy, fake everything. You can impress yourself, you can fool yourself, but it doesn't change the reality. It doesn't matter how many times the Pentagon put out reports about North Vietnamese casualties. The reality was the truth on the ground, and that truth is what played out. The reality in Ukraine is the truth on the ground. The truth in Ukraine, the truth on the battlefield, the truth in Russia. And Trump is so far removed from that truth with the numbers he's citing that his plan doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell. It's not going to get any traction. The Russians are going to give him the courtesy of one shot. One shot. Now, the Munich Security Council, Security Conference isn't that shot. That's a chance for they're going to float something out there formally. Because understand, everything we've heard so far isn't an official Trump doctrine. We've gotten leaks. We have a Kellogg paper written back in April of last year around which a plan was floated, supposedly. But remember, what the Russians responding to, people say the Russians rejected the Trump plan. Well, all Putin said is the things we're hearing in the media aren't going to happen. But that wasn't a Trump plan. Trump never said that's my plan. Right now, the Wall Street Journal is talking about a 100-day plan put out by Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg hasn't come out and articulated that. This is leaked stuff. And I think it's basically either people close to Trump or people who are against Trump floating these ideas out there. None of them have any chance of success. Meanwhile, NATO is falling apart at the seams. I mean, it's just collapsing as we speak. The realization they can't afford this stuff. I mean, the Germans came out and just said, we can't go to 10%. We can't even go to 5%. Because we don't have the budget to support that. Macron, we're going to double the French military budget, the French treasury. No, you're not. The British, we're talking big, but we're shrinking because NATO can't afford. NATO is collapsing as we speak. The European Union's frame, and so all of the things that would have to happen to make Ukraine viable is not. And then I'll leave it with this: that man you saw on the TV screen, Zelensky, that's a coked up, desperate man. Every word he says is so far removed from reality. He's a man in a panic, a sense of panic. He understands that the world is closing in around him. That's not the talk of a responsible person. No responsible leader would sit there and say, you have to give me nuclear weapons and missiles so I can deal with the Russian. Literally, I mean, he's an embarrassment to himself, to Ukraine, and to the West that propped him up. And all that does is solidify Russia's point is, we're not doing business with this guy. My best advice to Donald Trump is find out what the Russian plan is, find a way to relabel it the Trump plan, and you can walk away with a win. But otherwise, you're just going to get mud in your face. And Russia isn't any other country in the world. except maybe China. China can step up to the United States as well. But Trump can't. I think we've had this conversation before. His threat of $45 a barrel, oil. One, that requires the Saudis to cooperate. And the Saudis right now are saying, we have a break-even margin at $88 or $85. We're already losing money, 78. You asked us to lower the price. We ain't lowering the price anymore because we can't afford to do it. Plus, this nonsense in Gaza, you want us to lower oil while you're committing, you're talking about genocide. So the Saudis are out of it. But the real factor here is domestic. The West the Permian Basin, West Texas. There's two kinds of oil fields there. One is an established well, $66 a barrel break-even point. The other one is new. The established well is like $34 a barrel break-even point. The new drills, $66 a barrel. If you drop oil to $45 a barrel, you're going to lose 1/3, 30% of America's oil production in 2 years is going to be gone, and it's not going to recover. That'll destroy the American economy. So there's no aspect of the Kellogg-Trump plan that has any viability whatsoever. That insane idiot on TV, look, I'm not here to tell people what to do, but there was a South Vietnamese president back in the early 60s named Diem, who was causing a lot of headaches for the United States because he wasn't playing the game that we wanted played. And he ended up dead. And if Zelensky isn't careful, he's going to end up dead because he's become a problem, a huge problem for the United States, a huge problem for Europe, a huge problem for Ukraine. There's no aspect of him that factors into anything called a solution. And you saw it right there in front of you. That's insanity. That's literally a man who has lost his mind. Half of me wants to feel sorry for him, except that I remember in 2019, after he won an election based upon a peace platform, he held a war council where he pounded the table and said, I am going to take us to war with Russia. You got your war, pal. Again, you're thinking militarily. The Strait of Hormuz is best governed by, peaceful relations between Iran and its regional neighbors, including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And if you have that, then the flow of oil will transit no problem. Why does Russia need to now further extend itself to do something that's very un-Russian? The Russians don't go around building military bases around the world. That's what we do. The Russian military operation in Syria was an anomaly brought on by a unique set of circumstances that led to an invitation by Bashar al-Assad. Russia is operating in Africa with the Africa Corps, but it's done again at the invitation of nations. But Russia doesn't go around and just build bases to project power into a region. And I don't think Russia's going to build a base in the Strait of Hormuz. It makes no sense because that implies that there's going to be a military solution to that conflict. And a Russian military base in the Strait of Hormuz only puts Russia more at risk because that base will just be destroyed in day one of the war that doesn't need to be fought. When you find out how this system works, and that's what Elon Musk is doing right now, is finding out how the system works. It is one of the most corrupt systems in the world, and it has to come to an end. Otherwise, we'll never have the government we want. We have to take the money out of the government, the corruption out of the government. This is the revolution we want. Did you hear that the CIA, and I said the entire CIA's got to go. Every one of them is corrupt. Every single one of them is corrupted by their thought process, the lack of the constitutionality of what they do. CIA just said, you all can, we'll buy you out. Every one of you. All of our employees can walk 8-month severance package. How about right now, Trump is firing every FBI or bringing under review every FBI agent involved in the January 6th. Turns out that, 5,000 to 6,000 of the 13,000 agents were involved. So right off the bat, we're talking about a near 50% cut in FBI agents, which is perfect. I think you need to go further. This entire FBI agents in Albany, every one of them that came into my house have to go because they knew what they did was unconstitutional. The assistant district, U.S. District Attorney for Northern District of New York, got to go, got to be fired. But they did wrong, and there must be accounting. See, the way it works in the past is that they pretend that or they can leave an investigation open forever, and you'll never get it back. That's what they would do under normal circumstances. I don't know if this is going to be good in the long term or whatever, but understand this: that the next 4 years are going to be defined by a man filling a power vacuum and asserting American power prerogatives in a way that no president has ever asserted them in recent history. And the world is powerless in many cases to resist. What is Europe going to do if Trump decides to take Greenland? They can do nothing because they are nothing. That doesn't mean I want him to take Greenland. I'm just saying that if Trump decides to make Greenland America, he's going to do it. No one can stop him from doing that. There's a power vacuum. And so while I'm thrilled at Trump coming in and creating the revolution at home, understand that Trump is a two-edged sword. That same arrogance, that same aggressiveness that he's doing in destroying the establishment here, he's thrusting into the global environment. And that's not so good. I'm somebody who said this system that we have, and it's being exposed, the corruption of Washington, D.C. is being exposed. Hundreds of billions of dollars. First of all, they don't know where it goes. When you're told that in last year's budget, $261 billion, we just don't know where it went. How? That means there's corruption. That means it's going to places that nobody wants to report. It's unreported expenditures, lost money, whatever you want to call it. It's the payoff. It's how Washington, D.C. pays people off. And they do it. Now we're finding out USAID. Every senator, every congressman is out there screaming, you can't do this. Investigate them.